Drivers, start your engines!
Hit the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there, I want you to be perfect!
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him, but he talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver, pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger, no sweating working for the man, alright.
Good evening, race fans. Welcome to the Hoobazoo Radio Network and welcome to the Drafting the Show program. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour as we talk about everything racing. Joining me in the studio, I've got Luis Torres, Richard Union, and Joey Barnes. How you guys doing?
Good, thank you.
It's going quite stellar. Let's see how this thing goes.
Okay, let's see how this thing goes. And Joey, welcome. Joey, our occasional guest that we love to have you here. And Joey, you're a big IndyCar guy. So let's start off with the IndyCar race down at Barber, one of my favorite tracks. Although, you know, some fans are up in the air about whether the racing is boring or not. I thought it was pretty darn good myself. We saw Pato O'Ward with the win after Rinus Veekay had quite a good day in qualifying, took the pole, led the early portion of the race, but it was the in-laps and out-laps on a pit stop sequence that really killed him. He was leapfrogged by both Palou and O'Ward. He still wound up with a podium on the day, but with his win, O'Ward gets himself in the mix there. Palou goes to the championship lead as being the most consistent, and Newgarden drops out of the lead all the way down to, I believe, third in the championship now, just based on just a really kind of nondescript weekend out of Newgarden, which was surprising because he was one of the favorites going in here, having won his first race here and having won here at least on one other occasion. So, all in all, I enjoyed the race. But Joey, let's go ahead and break down this race here from Barber Motorsports Park in Alabama.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack with this race. I guess first on to kind of touch on a few things, just to kind of get this thing rolling here is, you look at the track itself. I mean, the racing ribbon for it's about 45 feet wide, 2.3 mile track, 17 corners. There's a lot of options for passing if you can create them, but obviously you've got to be pretty brave to want to go side by side. But I thought for this race in particular, it was more racy than I've seen it in quite a while. There was it was the same 2021 entire compound, just a slightly different construction that was brought to this track. Something they wanted to, that wasn't going to quite fall off as much. And I thought it was pretty good. I mean, obviously the top five for quite a while was a little bit of a boring show, but props to NBC for helping cover some of the strategies that were going on within the race, made it fun, did a whole lot of camera movement to some of the stuff that was happening in the middle of the field, it got pretty spicy. But you look at this race and you talk about Joseph Newgarden, who couldn't have had a more miserable Friday. And obviously struggled a little bit on Saturday, but on Sunday, it looked like between him and Colton Herta and Marcus Ericsson, they ended up pitting a little bit early on the 90 lap race. They ended up, supposed to be you could make it on two stops. Some guys were trying to push the envelope with the Reds and see if they can get three in and make up the lap time difference. And, you look at it and it's like Colton Herta, Joseph Newgarden, and Marcus Ericsson were on the three stopper. It was going well. And then on lap 32, while Colton and Joseph Newgarden were battling it out for what was ultimately the lead at the time on that strategy, Ilott goes off course, and his great weekend was kind of ruined, but it also kind of ruined the race of Newgarden, Herta, and Ericsson. So I would have been very interested to see what would have happened if that would have played out without the incident, because I think that we could have seen an interesting merge with some of the strategies in play. I think you would have seen Herta, Newgarden, O'Ward, Veekay, Palou out on track, just kind of battling it out for the top four, honestly, because I feel like it would have been really cool to see who could be conservative there and who wasn't.
No doubt that caution right then really negated the 3-stop strategy for those guys. Which which on a good day, some people wonder why you would ever try a 3-stop strategy, because conventional wisdom tells you that one less stop in the pits is going to equal less time, or more time on the track. But when you really kind of break it down, this was a question that was asked on social media. Someone was asking, why do people do a 3-stop race? Well, I mean, simply put, so you're never trying to stretch the fuel, and you've got less laps on the tires, particularly, if you need to really shorten up that stint on the reds, if you're in a particular case where the reds just don't last, like on some of the tracks. So, but it was kind of a shame that we had that whole group doing the 3-stop just put out of the mix and shuffled to the back where they stayed the rest of the day.
Yeah, and you look at this, and I actually didn't mind the 3-stopper. Somebody had to go for it. I think more than anything, it gives you clean track. If you're second, third, fourth, fifth, you're really kind of at the discretion of the leader's pace, because clean air is so dominant that it's such a struggle to pass just by itself with the way that this car's aerodynamics are, let alone push to pass that becomes push to defend and every other variable. So, you looking at, I think Colton and Newgarden were somewhere between 7th and 12th whenever they came to pit road during that stint. And, you get a bunch of clean racetrack, you can start clicking off some good lap times. I mean, and you saw later in the race, whenever everything started to clear out, you got Pato and Rinus that came to pit road, and, lap 61, I believe it was. I don't have the chart in front of me, but they come to pit road, and they're fighting for their outlap, and that's where O'Ward got Veekay ultimately in turn 5 on the outlap. But you look at Alex Palou, he was running 5th right as pit stop sequences started. Rossi goes to pit road, whoever was 4th at the time, I think it was McLaughlin, goes to pit road, and then you look at Veekay and O'Ward, and on the in lap and out lap and the service on the pit road, Palou made up 1.599 seconds of difference in combined time on those guys, which is how he came out second, which is another testament to clean racetrack, right? Everybody's going to fall off in front of you, and he somehow managed, and I don't know if he was on push to pass on his end lap or not. That's one stat I was curious about, but he was able to extend that middle stint 33 laps on fuel. And I don't want to go off on another weird deep tangent that I have a tendency to do on here, but you start looking at where everybody's talking about Pato and everybody's talking about Colton and Formula One and that. And I've been on this tirade for a minute, is the fact that how come nobody's looking at Alex Palou? I understand he's 25 and those other guys are 22, and Pato turns 23 on Friday. And it's but there's 2 years up, but go look at Palou. He's got fewer starts, more podiums, more championships. And you could argue, at least in the case of Colton Herta, that he's in comparable equipment. And I just don't know how nobody's sitting here talking about Alex Palou as being maybe that complete person that makes the jump from IndyCar to F1.
Can I get, and I think we talked about this a little bit on this show before, but and I totally agree. But to counter what you're saying, I think if you look at Palou and the typical ladder through to Formula One, he went through that ladder and not to be failed, didn't do any good. Look at GP3, had 2 seasons in GP3, didn't come in the top 10. Had a couple of races in Formula 2, didn't really do much there. Then he sort of went back to the Formula 3 European Championship, didn't even win a race in 2018 when he was, probably one of the most experienced drivers in the field. Outside of IndyCar and Super Formula, he hasn't really done much to make the F1 bosses, stand up and take note. Going through the typical series and the typical ladder, he just didn't impress. There's a lot of guys that certainly fared better than he did.
So by that estimation, though, and I understand Colton Herta is younger, right? He's 22. He had bad fast. When you look at what he was able to do, he was putting on passes, getting pinched by his teammate Grosjean in one, going off track, catching him a couple laps later, passing him. goes up, like literally the action was around Colton the entire time. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, he's so fast. He feels like where Max Verstappen was when Max broke into this, fast, but couldn't quite capitalize on some of those, got overambitious, was out driving the equipment and not letting the race come to him. And maybe this is the maturity difference of, where those 2 or 3 years are between Palou and Herta. Palou goes out, and I don't care what anybody says. Colton, yes, damn good, damn fast, but go look at who had the fastest lap time on Sunday. It was Alex Palou. It happened on the in lap. And it just, you go and you look at those things and you're like, okay, so and if you go and measure this with Colton, it's like, okay, well, but by the time that Max Verstappen was 22, 23, he just turned 23 and won the championship. If I'm wrong on my age, correct me. But yeah, and it's like all these things that Colton is struggling with are things that Max Verstappen struggled with 2, 3, 4 years ago. And you start to look at this and you're kind of like, okay, and if by your definition, Richard, you're looking at this and saying, well, Alex Palou didn't do anything, but then he's coming and kicking ass in the IndyCar series. What does that say about how the talent should be regarded in the series when you look at it from that perspective, as opposed to some of these other, people in the industry that are trying to look at Colton and Pato and say, those are the guys that are going to lead this charge. If IndyCar is going to have a presence in F1, it's going to be those guys. And
to a certain extent, I do agree with you. But, when Palou was in the feeder series in, 2018, 16, 17, 18, that sort of era, there's, if you migrate from GP3 to GP2 or Formula 2 or whatever you want to call it, if you come 10th and 15th 2 years in a row in GP3, very, very few of the GP2 bosses are going to look at you. And they didn't. He got like 3 or 4 races at the end of one season. And, from the Formula 1 paddock, you've got maybe 1, 2, 3 rookies a year at most coming through. When he was in those graduate classes, there was certainly a lot of drivers of a better standard that had you can only demonstrate what you can demonstrate in those feeder sets. You can only beat who you're driving against. And if you didn't beat them, then it's very difficult to pick him over some of the others. And I've been very critical of Colton Herta on this show in the past. And I think what we saw last weekend...
Just in the past?
Well, past, present, and probably future.
There you go. Okay. Let's in the interest of accuracy, yeah.
Yes.
Or in general, just altogether.
In general, yes. But I think what we saw last weekend reiterated that. He got unlucky in qualifying. He started down in the back, and that was the opportunity for Colton Herta to really put a marker down to say, I'm here. But he made a stupid move again.
Well,
and cost points and cost results and cost his position, his race position finish. And
he did make a brilliant pass on Grosjean, despite Grosjean pulling an F1S defense on him.
But that's part of it again, isn't it? That's part of the smarts of a driver that's aware of what's around him.
I mean, granted, Grosjean kind of raced like a jackass on.
Well, yeah, but
we get that in a bit. But I do want to kind of circle back to Palou, and
for sure,
because Joey, I definitely smell what you're stepping in, because if you look at Palou and what he does, right, and he's very quietly one of the most complete drivers in the series, right? I mean, the thing, and there's no fanfare about it, right? People should be,
Dario 2.0 right now.
Yeah, exactly. Or very Dixon-esque in a bit of a way, but he comes in quiet. Well,
I say Dario because of a couple of reasons. One, I mean, Dario mentored him, but two, who is the one driver that's come through Ganassi that's made you forget Scott Dixon was at Ganassi?
Dario.
Nicholas Manassian?
No, Nicholas Manassian was before.
I know. I'm just being Charlie Kimball. Kimball.
But you look at this, and look, Scott Dixon is as good as it gets, right? I mean, that right there is the pinnacle. It's the standard. He still is, in my opinion, the pinnacle and the standard. He's just been unlucky with qualifying. Now, you make your own luck on a lot of ways, and they're just missing it by just a fraction. He's still every bit as good as what Palou's been able to dish out. It's just right now, whatever it is that's happening within that organization, within whatever Palou is tapped into, he's just not relented. And the fact that this guy, wins the championship, and then 4 races later, he's already leading the points to defend his crown. I mean, hell.
Right, very, very quietly leading the points. He, like I say, he hasn't made a bunch of headlines, hasn't done a bunch of splashy stuff. It is like, yeah. But again, it's just like it reminds me. It took Dixon years to build a fan base because he just was so quietly just going about his job and doing it well. And I see the same thing in Palou, but I just see long term this guy really continuing just to do well because he gets the most out of the car that he can. He doesn't try to push it past what the car can do, and brings it home and will collect the points that he can get on any given day. Whereas Herta, he's got that little bit of a Gilles Villeneuve in him, where he just wants to extract the most out of a shitty car and end up in a wall rather than on a podium.
Well, I want to throw something your way here, and this is for Richard and for you too, Frank.
All right, my man.
This is not necessarily anything this is just my eyes and looking at this stuff and wondering what to make of it. You look at Andretti Autosport, and they came to Barber, they tested, right? And they blew everybody out of the water at the test. You come here 3 weeks later to Barber, 4 weeks later, whatever it was. And, Friday, Colton Herta head and shoulders above the field, 2/10, if I remember correctly. Or maybe I'm thinking of VK's qualifying lap. VK's qualifying lap was definitely up like 1.9 or 0.19. Anyway, you look at Andretti though, and they owned it on Friday, except for DeFrancesco. All the drivers were in the top 4. And you look at Saturday, and even though Rossi put it in the fence, just trying to extract too much, they repair it, they put a new fresh back in it, new engine, and he goes out there and ends up being best of the Andretti bunch. And the only reason Colton wasn't part of the Fast Six is because Ericsson's off in qualifying and put out a red flag on his flying lap. Point that I'm trying to get, though, is Penske wasn't one of those groups. They struggled all day Friday. Suddenly, Saturday, somebody goes a different direction. Will Power qualifies 19th. Newgarden's out to lunch. McLaughlin's the only shining star that they have. Suddenly, and I don't know if Newgarden's setup was on this path, but I know that, or Powers, but you look at Newgarden went the route of McLaughlin setup and started to hit on a few things. By the end of this race on Sunday, 2 out of the 3 Penske drivers were ahead of every single Andretti car. And it's not for a lack of pace, because Rossi was bad fast and Colton was bad fast. And obviously Grosjean got really quick there at the end. I don't know what is missing from this group to prevent them from just being able to have a complete weekend. You look at all of the flashes of brilliance that they have on a weekend, and it's astonishing the pace that they can extract, every single one of them. And for whatever reason, there's not a way that they've been able to put it together. Now we're getting into the month of May. We're here. Indy's around the corner. They're always lightning quick there. They're always one to watch. It's a Honda package type of thing, although that might change this year. Who knows? We'll get into that later, I'm sure. But I just want to know what you guys kind of see, because to me, I'm baffled at how a team can go and test, and the team that doesn't test can suddenly just flip the script over a 3-day window. And I know it's Penske being Penske, but that's still a damn good team at Andretti Autosport.
Yeah, I've talked about this a couple of weeks ago on the show, and I almost wonder if that Michael himself, with all his trying to buy a Formula One team, has become a little too disconnected from the IndyCar effort. That maybe his leadership isn't there. And I hate to say anything bad about Michael, because I love the guy, and I have a lot of respect for what he does. But it just seems like they can't get it right, and they've been kind of I go back to the video of Rossi trying to put a dumpster fire out. I think, well, that kind of describes Rossi's season. And so I kind of wonder if there's just too much distraction, or if they're spread too thin. Penske always, when they get to 4 cars, they feel like they're spread too thin. When they go to 3, they become really, really lean and really nearly unstoppable. But Andretti's consistently been 4 cars, 5 and as many as 6 when it comes to the 500. So I just wonder if they need to think about leaning down the organization and just getting that focus on, just because right now you got Herta's the only one that's won a race for them in a couple of years. Yep. Grosjean has some flashes of brilliance. Rossi has been either, unlucky or just not fast, or just, cartoon anvil falling on his head at any given time. Yeah. So I really can't put my finger on one specific thing, but I really wonder if that Michael is a little more disconnected than he once was.
Before Richard, I toss it to you to answer that question. One note on Rossi to clarify for the listeners out there that may have not been able to catch everything. Going into the final pit stop, Rossi was running in the top 5, and then was the only driver on used alternate soft compound, and ended up having a dramatic fall that ended up running him down to 9th. So over those last he pitted on lap 60. So those last 30 laps, he was the one driver that literally fell like a rock, and out of the top 5. Him and McLaughlin fell out and finished 6th, but that's just kind of where everything looked when Rossi was looking at knocking on the door of his first podium in quite a while. That's how that played out for him. Richard?
Oh, it's difficult really to pinpoint. As you say, you'd expect somebody that goes through the trouble of testing somewhere and being good in testing and they like to have that solid race. But sometimes you can go testing and it just leads you down the wrong path. And potentially that's what's happened here. I'd be surprised, but I think sometimes also I think Frank's very right. I think that Andretti's lost its way due to external things around the team rather than just pure driver performance. And I think that, now I don't know the inner workings of Andretti, goodness me, none of us do, but I think it's telling in a way that let me ask this question. My personal opinion, rightly or wrongly, is that the last 18 months, Andretti Autosport has become a mechanism or a vehicle or whatever you want to call it to get Colton Herta into Formula One, pure and simple. And you do that by winning races. And at some races, he has been phenomenally fast and dominant and very, very impressive. But is that to the detriment of the rest of the team? Is Michael Andretti's focus shifting away onto other projects? And, the buying Sauber last year, the, supposedly looking to have the funding to enter his own team, that's not an easy job. And to be shuffling that with an IndyCar team, a Formula E team, all the other series has got involved. I think he's got too much on. I genuinely do. And I think that maybe there's no direction and no leadership there. Now, Michael Andretti himself is not going to make setup calls and not going to make all these decisions, but it could well be that the big players in his team who are influential in the IndyCar team they're the ones that are being spread. I think that these teams aren't run by one person, so I don't think you can look at Michael Andretti as an individual to sort of be the messiah sort of thing or the Pied Piper in terms of leading it. But it's that second level of management to see what happens there, and you see it a little bit. I don't know who that would be at Andretti, but you look at in the Penske world, a Tim Cindric or Ganassi. I think it's Mike Hull, isn't it? Who, you know, those sort of people. You know, where's that person in Andretti? That's the real person that does the day-to-day work. That
right. But even so, you bring up Penske, but if you look at, you know, Penske's having a fine season this year, having leaned down to 3 cars, but you know, since Roger bought the Speedway and kind of became hands off on a team, they initially struggled until they kind of got more comfortable in the business model without Roger there, hands on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's, you know, kind of similar to what's going on with Andretti, that Michael was more hands on, and it's a matter of those other guys stepping up.
But to the same extent, I don't buy that directly. I don't think I think people get lost by this. You know, I'll tell you from my experiences of working for teams like Williams. You know, Frank Williams didn't lead the engineering meetings and decide on car setups. Richard Childress didn't. Well, maybe he did at times. Didn't lead too heavily on how to, you know, set up a car. I don't think it's the top people that are the issue. I think it's the second rung.
Yeah,
those are the people. The more what I would call the competition director, the technical director, the you know, that sort of level of personnel that may be being spread too thin. But you see, with Penske, there was a natural progression. You know, Roger buys the Speedway, buys the sport, basically. And, you know, pretty quickly that's going to settle down and there's going to be an end result. He's bought it. It's operating at a profit. He's expanding it. He's got whatever he wants to get in place. On Andretti, I don't know where that goes, because what happens if, you know, at what point do they say, okay, Colton Herta isn't going to get a Formula One draft, which I'll tell you now, I don't think he is. You know, where does that lead her? You know, where does that leave Andretti? What's the purpose of Andretti's IndyCar project right now? I don't think it's to win races and win championships and build up the team with their 4 drivers. I think it's solely focused on getting Colton Herta into Formula One. And I think it's a waste of time. I really do. I think the guy will get there if he's good enough. And at the moment, he's showing speed, but he's not showing the consistency which is needed. And that's where I think they're going wrong.
I don't necessarily buy that the whole purpose of the team is to get Herta into Formula One, but yeah, that is definitely a.
But every week,
that's what the media talks about.
And that's
you know what I mean. That's
what the hell am I, Frank?
Yeah. It's like you have all these people talking about it, but also to chime in, also as far as performance, we talk about all of that, but also it boils down to the competitors level, what they do with it. And we talked about numerous times with Herta, when it comes to pressure, he's yet to craft the pressure. That's the biggest thing. He tried to go fast, try to gain as much as possible. And you saw with there, same with, to some extent, Grosjean, where he drove over his head this weekend. It's that. Go on.
Let's talk about Grosjean and the Graham Rahal thing. Yeah, because that's
I got one bow to put on this Herta thing.
All right.
I think number one, though, I know we're talking about Palou, we're talking about Herta and Pato and all this, and like you, Richard, clearly, you don't necessarily think that everything's there for him to get to Formula One, because there needs to be more consistency to match the pace and just more complete drives, maybe even a championship, for crying out loud. But I look at this and also say this: Alex Palou didn't do a whole lot in junior formula, but he's doing a lot now. And he's outrunning guys that were in Formula One that are revered. Grosjean's pace in F1, although he was a little bit of a wrecker, let's be real. But the pace that he could extract from a car was still really good. And he has the tools to know how to develop a team properly based on what you saw with Haas those years. Obviously did some solid stuff with Lotus. The fact that you've got guys that are outrunning the Marcus Ericssons, who clearly is showing more now than he did then, makes you wonder if he was in a better mid-tier team, what he could have done. Would he have had a Nick Heidfeld type career per se? But you look at this type of stuff, and I think that it's all boiling down to the fact that we're starting to see talent on a more level playing field here. And that's why I think you could see guys like Colton, Pato, and even Palou, if the right opportunity presented itself by the end of this year, I think after this year, if there's not an opportunity there, it's not happening. But all in all, you look at this and it's like, okay, they're level. I see a scenario where this can happen because even though Colton's not finishing races, people who want an American in this sport, and Liberty's going to push for one. And obviously, if it doesn't happen with Andretti, we could see it happen with Zach Brown's McLaren team replacing Danny Rick, which obviously would be an interesting scenario with how this develops with the contract with Pato. That's the part that I'm curious about. But all this spider webs to the fact that no matter how you try to cut this, there's going to be an effort, and there already is an effort made to put an American on the F1 grid. And I think it's just strictly, who's that going to be? I don't necessarily even think it's which IndyCar guy, because I think there could be a couple over this next few years. But which American is it going to be? Is it going to be Colton Herta, or do we start looking at Kyle Kirkwood? Because we've been hearing this hype even with Road to Indy stuff, to the point that Will Buxton's talking about him before he even turned a lap in an IndyCar. And that part, I think, is what's going to be driving this narrative more so than what the results end up being, if that makes sense.
Yeah, certainly.
Can I give you one? Sorry, to very quickly. And this sort of loops back to something we were talking about a few minutes ago, 5 minutes ago here. To a certain extent, it's very difficult to compare Max Verstappen to Colton Herta at the age that they're in. Similar age groups and similar mindsets and you sort of wonder kid sort of mentality. And I've just, while we've been talking here, looked at some numbers. Now, admittedly, Verstappen has competed in more Formula One races than Herta has IndyCar races, so it's not a direct comparison. But 48% of Verstappen's retirements from Formula One have been due to contact, which is pretty high. What percentage of Herta's retirements have been due to contact?
I wouldn't have the slightest right now.
67%.
Okay, thank you. I was going to say define contact, his doing or somebody else.
In other words, not finishing the race. Not
okay,
finishing
general.
the race.
I thought you meant like contact with another driver, not just like
no. So I'm talking about retirement. So of Verstappen's retirements, just under 50% have been caused. Just under half have been caused by accidents, contact. Whether it's self-inflicted or with another driver. From Herta's perspective, over two-thirds of his retirements have been caused by contact, accidents, collisions, whatever you want to call it.
That's a hell of a stat.
Yeah, I can probably name a good chunk of them quite well.
That is the sort of stuff, and especially a number of the ones for Colton Herta have been, me, myself, and I sort of accidents. You think of Long Beach, you think of Nashville. Whereas Verstappen very rarely makes those individual mistakes that I can think of. A lot of his have been wheel-to-wheel contact.
My only rebuttal is I'd be very curious to see if Colton would be able to drive a car that has power steering, more on the limit, more on the ragged edge, without facing the potentialness of losing the car and walling it, for lack of a better term.
But the times when he's, you're looking back to Long Beach, the comments he made post accident at Long Beach is like, well, I wasn't really pushing that hard. It's just lack of concentration rather than driving the car on the limit. I think he can drive the car on the limit as well as anybody, and he showed that at places like Laguna last year, where he was just phenomenal. But it's those mistakes of, I said Nashville was a prime example. It just basically probably running at 75% and just brain fade.
Yeah. All right, Frank, you wanted to ask about Grosjean and
or the other thing we could talk about is Kirkwood and Kirkwood's possibility for Formula One, which you had alluded to, as you said, Bill. Will Buxton is talking about Kirkwood, but we need to remember, Kirkwood, while he is racing for AJ Foyt right now, is still under contract with Andretti. Andretti still is rumored to be buying an F1 team if the FIA approves it. So, I mean, that definitely ranks as a possibility here. And if you look at what Kirkwood is doing in the Foyt cars, better things than anybody else has done in a Foyt car in a while. So
I can't confirm the Andretti thing as far as he's still under contract with Andretti. That part I don't know. But
as far as I know, he's on a 1-year loan. Well, I think Andretti still has the option on his contract. what I understand, or it could be Honda has the option on his contract, but Honda, Andretti by proxy. But I mean, either way, he's heavily rumored to be replacing Rossi at Andretti next year. But the whole premise of perhaps he's the next American in Formula One is kind of interesting to think about, because here's a guy with he's a bit younger. He's probably a little more moldable. So
Actually older than Colton
is he?
By a few months, I believe.
Okay.
I think he just turned 23.
That shows what I know.
It's like how Alex Albon's older than Max Verstappen.
Yeah, I know. It's sometimes
you look at it's just the fact that Kirkwood has just been dominant at every level, and now he's like, I actually think Foyt's improved as a team, but like he's just on rails. Like I swear to goodness, I think that if he was in one of the top 3 teams, we could have talked about him possibly winning one of the opening 4 races. I mean, I honestly believe his talent is on that level. It's just, he could have won Texas in a Foyt car possibly if not for that little incident in turn 3 and 4. I mean, it just the pace that he can extract and the way that he can just stay on the limit consistently. It's not just finding it and just pounding out 1 or 2 consistent laps and then being a 10th under it. It's the fact that he's able to find that limit and stay there. I personally haven't seen anybody be able to do that. And that's just my own personal experience, seeing him grow through the road to Indy. I mean, I got nothing but praise for the kid. I think he's going to be a star, wherever he races, honestly.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He just got to get in that right opportunity, which will, likely, come for him next year. But I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility, with the way some yellows fall here and there. If we have rain on a road course, that you see Kirkwood actually win a race for Foyt, and Foyt hasn't won a race since Takuma won Long Beach back in 2013.
Yep.
All right. So do we want to talk about the Rahal and Grosjean thing, which was on a lot of people's minds of the
I made my 2 cents on it.
All right.
So.
Okay, Louise, let me hear your 2 cents on it.
Basically, the fact that he's just knocking the doors twice is like, it's late in the race, but was it really necessary to door bang on an open wheel? We know how he was in F1, but for IndyCar, it's like, you got to chill, because Rahal made a good point about the penalties. Should he got one? Probably maybe for the second one, but was it a racing ordeal to some? It may be to some. It's not. It's just one thing that stood out to me is when Rahal said he's been penalized for far less. The first thing that came in my mind, 2019 Long Beach, with that whole blocking fiasco where he was robbed of a strong result due to it. But hey, it's sparking some interest in terms of a little rivalry. It's just a matter of time whether or not it will continue on as the season progresses. Time will tell, like any form of rivalry in racing.
Yeah, the thing about Graham Rahal, though, right? Because he tends, he's got a reputation as being a bit of a whiner. You know what I mean? So it's almost like the boy that cried wolf. Maybe he's justified this time. Maybe he's not. I don't know. I think people are making a whole lot more of it than it was. It was just a little secondary tap. It didn't take any of the cars off course. It didn't improve Grosjean's position much. So I don't know. At the end of the day, I think it's
I mean, if Rahal wasn't low on fuel, he would have held him off because he was low on fuel. That's why he lost that battle at the end.
Exactly. So we can move on from that. And before we move away from talking about IndyCar, let's just talk about Rinus Veekay. Really good weekend for the guy. Really solid. Unfortunately, he got held up a little bit on his in lap in the pits. I think he was behind Mr. Jimmy Johnson. While Palou and O'Ward had a clean track in front of him, but really good momentum for the Carpenter team heading into Indianapolis, where they tend to do well. If you recall, VK has started on the front row there before. Of course, Ed Carpenter's had a number of good runs there. I think he's got 3 poles and a second place in the race. So things look pretty good for Ed Carpenter Racing heading in there. And VK again, just another great young talent in the series.
No question. It was a much needed, encouraging result for VK because remember, ever since he had that cycling accident, he has not finished on the podium since Belle Isle won race number 1. So it's been a long, long time since we saw VK put on a superb weekend. Yeah, while a shot of the win didn't came to be, good shot in the arm for that 21 squad because they have needed that, and especially VK because it was not that long before his accident where he had to miss a race and kind of his season went south. He was in the cusp of that maybe being a dark horse title contender, but as the season went on, that kind of was whitewashed, and he hasn't made that much noise. So it's a much needed run for that whole organization, and also another one behind VK, Will Power. The fact that we're 4 races in and his worst finish is literally just 4th, it shows that there's consistency, and that's going to come a long way if you're going to beat the Ganassi guys like Palou right now. And if things go in the right direction, like the next race coming up where he's been super successful, and if he puts up if he gets a good strong month of May, that's going to really put him into a title contender, no question.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, especially the double points there. Yeah, so
it's
all
hard
right.
to believe. It's hard to believe that VK's 21 still.
I know. Yeah, he's.
I just, we talk about F1 guys that should be on the F1 radar. I mean, certainly he's one, but he's still, like, you look at him and when he gets it right, I mean, he's pretty much untouchable, right? Until the brain fade in turn 5, he was good to probably take this race on Sunday. But man, once he starts to kind of get a little bit more refined, and when that program continues to grow, and like he said, their best tracks are coming up, that could be a fun watch for the next decade or more with him. Not just where he goes if he gets out of IndyCar and maybe ends up getting that shot to F1, but if he stays in this series and it's him and Palou and Newgarden and guys like that battling for another 10 years, like, my gosh, what a series that could be.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is that every now and again you hear a couple of hushed whispers that that Roger Penske has his eye on VK for maybe a possible replacement for Will Power in another couple of years. So
an Ed Carpenter driver on the path to Penske? Who? I never.
I don't know where I got that from. So
I don't know, somebody who drove the 67 once.
Some guy from Tennessee. Yeah. So all right. So let's turn our attention to Formula One. And let's talk about we're going to Miami. But first, let's talk about the big announcement from Volkswagen AG and Porsche and Audi, both apparently joining Formula One in, 2024? 2026. 2026. So this is, ahead of the new engine regs. So the word I'm hearing is that Audi is probably going to be a factory team, purchase an existing team. I don't know what team they're going to purchase, and that Porsche will align themselves with Red Bull. So Richard, what are the odds that this really happens? Because we're still 4 years out.
I think for a company like VW to make a commitment to this, it's pretty telling. Both the Audi and the Porsche brands are VW's biggest income stream, more so than the VW brand, ironically, and it makes sense. It suits the image of the brand, doesn't it? Audi go up against Mercedes, Porsche goes up against Ferrari. You're really only missing BMW from the equation. We all know what happened there. I think it'll happen. Both of them, not sure. It's going to be an interesting one to see how that dynamic works with them competing against each other, but basically being funded by the same the same parent company. But as you said there, Frank, the alignment does appear to be Porsche with Red Bull, and they have like a turnkey solution in reality. All it turns out for Red Bull is basically sponsorship, and you don't know really how much input Porsche will have directly because they'll just pay Red Bull to, rebrand their cars as, Porsche powered, with probably keep the same staff, maybe put a bit more money in there, maybe invest a little bit more, but that's a pretty quick solution. for Audi to go and buy a team, I mean, there's obviously 2 or 3 candidates. There's supposedly a lot of talk with McLaren in there. Talk about, Williams potentially, Sauber, we all know their position. And also Aston Martin. And as time goes on, I'm pretty certain that Lawrence Stroll is realising he's not going to get what he wants out of Aston Martin with his current expectations of what the input is required to get what he wants.
Out of Lance, you mean?
But well, yeah, basically out of his own son. He's got to.
Yeah, but you got to wonder if Stroll's going to hang out for 4 more seasons before to hold.
Yeah, I just can't.
That's the thing is it's so early. I don't know. There's a lot of development time. We're talking, build from the ground up. But I kind of wonder is if Audi wants to be a factory team and they're lining themselves with Red Bull, what's the possibility that AlphaTauri becomes Audi? You know what I mean? Because there you go. Now you're all operating under the same kind of umbrella, both engines and both teams there. So it's just a thought.
Yeah,
again.
I mean,
nobody really knows. Then again, what's the possibility
knows.
Yeah, what's the possibility that Andretti goes in there, gets a team in 2024, and then 2026, boom, he's the Porsche factory team or the Audi factory team.
Yeah. Well, it has this potential because we all know that without any hesitation, I'm sure Gene potentially would be looking to sell the team. We all know that's a distinct possibility, or at least look for some new investment. So there's probably half the grid are up for sale. In reality, we know that obviously that the manufacturing teams are not open to investment or for sale. So yeah, it'll interesting to see over the next probably year or 18 months. And you look back when BMW purchased Sauber. I thought for a while there it was BMW Sauber powered by Ferrari for a while, if my recollection is correct. So I don't think there would be an issue for potentially an Audi branded team to run another manufacturer's engine, as especially if there's contracts in place. And yes, these car manufacturers are rivals, but they also know how the bread's buttered on these sort of things, and money talks. So I wouldn't dismiss it out of hand that Audi buy into a Williams team. And I mean because we've seen it all in the past. We all remember like the Mechachrome engine and the Supertech engine and things like that in the past, which it's just a rebranded engine or a rebadged engine under another name.
Play Live or the Judd engine, call it whatever you want to this week. The Judd Honda, slow. The Judd Toyota, slow, yeah.
But yeah, so it's there's more than one way to skin a cat on these sort of things, and I'm sure with some clever marketing and the like, for a year or two, Audi would suck up that pain of running a competitor engine in there. They're certainly not going to develop an engine, for this current specification of car, because it's just not worth it. The amount of investment that would go into it. So, and the as far as I'm aware, the engine regulations for 2026 are not set in stone yet. So there's a lot of moving parts still involved. So until that's all signed off, which is probably another year away, I think, you're not going to see any movement on that. And that may be an ideal opportunity for an Andretti to come in with an Audi or a Porsche and work together and build that together. But it's a good problem to have from a Formula One perspective, and I think it's only a good thing. And one thing I keep thinking of, it'll be very interesting to see what happens with Formula One's exposure in the US, this year and next year, with ultimately there being 3 races next year. If that really starts to take off and, gain that point, because goodness me, at the end of next year, you could have Formula One races in the US with higher spectator, higher TV audience figures than NASCAR potentially. I mean, that's unheard of. I don't think that's beyond the realms of impossibility there. And then would, your GMs, your Chevy, would they start looking at Formula One again in a serious way with that exposure? Who knows?
Well, the thing is, with the new cost caps in Formula One, it's a little more economical for a manufacturer to get in there knowing what their budget is, rather than the unlimited spending we've seen in years past.
Yeah, but that's just the operational costs, not the development costs.
Well,
to develop an engine,
but
that wouldn't be covered by those costs.
But at the same time,
oh yes,
there's a little more structure there.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
All right, so we did have a NASCAR race on Monday, or part of it Sunday, part of it Monday. Louise, you get a chance to watch it?
Yeah, fortunately, I was able to, in the sense of I don't have to work that night. I don't work Sunday night, so I was able to see the Cup races at hand, and it was quite an interesting race, to say the least. Where tire wear, especially at the beginning for like most of the race, you saw a lot of tire problems. We're not talking about literal tire problems where it falls out, like exiting out of pit road where you barely beat one of your tires, aka Danny Hamlin, where we saw single car spins. We saw multitude of incidents that involved like Kurt Busch, Kyle Larson. And yet Larson was able to rally back to get a respectable result, whereas Kurt, his day was done. I mentioned Hamlin. He had a good, bad, and ugly afternoon on the Monday portion. Sunday he was in control till Larson was ahead, and then the rain happened. They halted the race for 20 hours and then got it back going. But Hamlin won stage one. But from that point, the moment that wheel came off, it went south to where he barely recovered. Then Cody Ware lost control. Shoulda, coulda, woulda, hold his brakes. Doesn't really matter. Hamlin was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He ended up running into Ware. That pretty much ruined his day. And so basically Hamlin's awful season, except for the win at Richmond, continues.
Hamlin is actually the farthest down driver in points, farthest down Toyota driver in points.
Yeah, it's just been, aside from that Richmond win, it has been just a complete disaster.
Yeah.
Let's be said about his year better.
Tough year for Denny, and the last thing he needed was to have a run-in with Cody Ware.
And on top of that, then you also had Allmendinger, who was having a strong run to probably go to put it in the top 10. Colleague Racing had a solid weekend at Dover. Probably one of the more better weekends they had all together as a group in the Cup Series to date. Then lost the wheel. Allmendinger was fuming, was very mad about it. Now you have two teams with suspended crew chiefs, while two of them came back this week, like Booty Barker from Bubba Wallace camp and Barrett Kosowski's. They got their crew chiefs back, and in exchange, Denny Hamlin and the 16 teams crew chiefs are suspended till Gateway.
It just blows my mind that with a single lug nut, we can't keep a wheel on a NASCAR car. It's like
sports cars and Indy cars have done fine
for years. My golly, for decades. I don't understand I don't know if it's a bit of a design flaw that it's so easy to not get the nut on there properly, or
it's their first year in general for some of those guys that are changing tires.
Yeah, theoretically speaking, it should be easier, quicker, and more secure. But yet we have these continued, loose wheel kind of things going on. So I don't know if it's I have to wonder if there's a bit of a design flaw in there.
I think what is this like this? This is the fifth or sixth one we've seen, because I mentioned Allmendinger, Bubba, Denny, Casagralla, Justin Haley, BJ McLeod. All of them had single tire problems, and they've had their crew chiefs suspended for it. So it's
sounds like a lot of bad nuts.
Yeah, we talked about that last week. We're not going to go to. There's no updates regarding that ordeal, by the way. I'll put it that way. But as far as the race itself, it came down to Ricky Stenhouse Jr. was able to it got better as the race went on. Albeit he didn't win the race. That was Chase Elliott who got it done.
Oh yeah, I guess we should mention. Yeah, Chase Elliott won the race. Yeah, he hasn't won on an oval in
since the championship at Phoenix.
Right. Yeah, since he won the championship. So good for him. Nice boost for that team because all of his teammates have won.
Yeah, and the thing is, Chase Elliott. Yeah, remember the big picture is he and Ryan going into Dover has been nobody's really been talking about is the regular season championship battle, which you do get 15 playoff points at the end. So there's some playoff implications being regular season championship leader. Blaney and Elliott have been in a tight battle for just no one's to show for it till Elliott won Monday. So that'll certainly help. And that puts actually Kyle Larson is the one with the longest winless streak of the Hendrick drivers, which is hard to believe considering the season that he had a year ago. But it's an interesting note that up in the first 10 races this year and last year, he didn't really start clicking off wins until the month of May, and it began at Darlington where he was racking up those top 2 finishes. So time will tell if we're going to see a similar replication this year, but we'll see. It's just Larson has not had luck on his side at all, aside from winning Fontana, except Larson has been able to capitalize much more than Denny and been able to put better results. And at this point, we can talk about Ross Chastain being a title contender because, good grief, he's not had any. They said it in a telecast, and they're not wrong. He's not had any weaknesses on any of the type of the circuits we run.
No, Ross Chastain's been there week in and week out, and we've talked about him, for a couple of weeks on the show here. So, yeah, that's a guy that you can't really look beyond. It's not just one lucky win here and good for him, but no, here he is. He's in the thick of it every week.
No, so at this point, Darlington's gonna be probably the next ultimate test, and if he does really well, then we gotta consider him being a title contender for real. I think he is. But that will really solidify if he has a superb run in that Coca-Cola 1 car.
All right. And we are off to Darlington this week, right?
Yep. The throwback weekend.
Throwback weekend. Yeah. We've seen some of the throwback liveries, some of the, what was the guy who had the 777 car? Had to get a special dispensation from the rules to run that number. But yeah, so it's always neat to see all those old liveries come back. So, but we are kind of pushing up against our time limit here. So, Louise, I'm going to ask you to pick a winner for Darlington.
I'm looking at I say Ross Chastain gets it done.
There you Darlington. Go. All right. Joey, who do you like for Darlington?
Truex.
Truex. Yeah, that's a good pick too. I like for Darlington. I'm gonna go with you mentioned him earlier, Kyle Larson. I'm gonna say he gets back on track here. So now Formula One is in Miami. I believe we made our Miami picks last week, did we not?
Yeah.
Does Richard not get a pick on Darlington?
No, he does not.
No.
Oh, sad.
All right, so Joey, who do you like for Miami Formula One?
Ooh, new track, new layout,
adaptability, yeah.
Street circuit. It's an unknown because it's isn't this the first street circuit we've had this year? Technically,
Saudi.
Saudi, yeah. So
yeah.
If you're there, not stop it, Joe. It's not a street circuit. It's a circuit in a parking lot with little walls around it. Street circuits are Monaco and Azerbaijan and Singapore. This is not a street circuit. I wish people stop calling them street circuits. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm going to say
good sandbox idea, though.
Carlos Sainz.
All right, and we picked ours last. I can't remember who I picked last week, though. I want to say I went with Verstappen.
I think I went with George.
You did. You went with George Russell and Rich. Remember who you picked?
Leclerc. I don't know. I can't remember now.
Okay, well that's who you got now. So anyway, So we are out of time. So then you know what? Great show tonight, guys. I want to thank you, Joey, Louise, Richard. I want to thank Dan Blay Racing Art for sponsoring our program. I want to thank Mark Dill and Legend of the First Super Speedway, firstsuperspeedway.com. Is where you can buy that book, Dan Blay Racing Art. You can find him on Facebook. I want to thank the Hoobazoo Radio Network, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. But most of all, I want to thank you folks that listen to us every week. But until next week, good night.
Who? 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 Who?